order at this time. We'll stand for the invocation, which will be the Lord's Prayer. And then I'm going to ask Chuck if he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory forever. Amen.
Salute. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Commissioner Hughes?
Here.
Commissioner Mosier?
Here.
Commissioner Richardson?
Here.
Commissioner West?
Here.
Thank you. The minutes were in your packet. Is there a motion to accept these minutes?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion does carry. The recorder has a report of distributions for the month of July. Jessica.
In the general fund on page 1, you'll see the top disbursement to Alicia Myers, $2,512. That was for a pretty significant amount of the flowers that we use in landscaping around the city. Further down, we paid our annual fee to East Tennessee Development District for $922.24. And we paid East Tennessee Security Solutions $30,000. That was for an upgrade on security cameras that covered the parks from the duck park through the recreation complex. It added a few cameras and gave us a little bit more visibility. And plus, we don't have to pay service charges whenever those come through. So hopefully we'll end up saving some money on those compared to the last vendor. Towards the bottom of the page, we paid for our premise software that the police department uses for records, $5,520 to Team Solution Consulting. That's an annual amount. Page 2, you'll see several checks for a Cigna rebate to about 10 employees who had paid premium. So that rebate, the rest of it went to offset future premium increases. But the employees that had actually paid premium for dependents, they received part of that rebate back. And that rebate also included an audit that they had gone back probably 10 years. So some of those amounts ended up being pretty significant, but it was a long period of time that they audited and found out that they had not refunded us quite enough. Page 3, you'll see a payment to Jinx Concrete. That was deposit for the fitness court work that they did, $2,009.39. We're hoping that that fitness court will be installed possibly as early as next week by the contractor. Further down, Sweetwater Utilities Board, $32,314.92. That, of course, includes the high mast lighting, the street lighting, and our utility bills for the buildings. Further down, the vacation pay ended up being significant, $27,936.78. Again, that was a one-time payout because of COVID, but I think the employees really appreciated it because they would have lost all of that since they had been unable to take some of that vacation pay last year. Further down page 4, about halfway down, we cut the Board of Education a check for $5,528.23. That's half of the liquor by the drink taxes. So throughout the year, we collect monthly liquor by the drink taxes through the state. And then at the end of the year, we cut a check to the Board of Education for half of whatever those collections are. And this year, liquor by the drink was up significantly, so they got a larger portion. Also, the employee and employer retirement, $19,949.20. That was posted by journal entry towards the bottom of the general fund. State Street Aid didn't have any expenditures, and that's because most of what had happened, what we paid out in July, was actually booked for June, so it was on the previous month's report. Same thing for Drug Enforcement Fund. In the Tourism Fund, we paid our annual membership to the Middle East Tennessee Tourism Council. That's the group that's given us several tourism awards. It's $150 a year to be a member of them. Also, there were 2 disbursements to Jessica Morgan, $26.88 and $392.76. That was reimbursement for travel for the World Tourism Conference that we will be hosting here in October. Also, we paid our annual fee for the Civil War Trails marker, which is $200. We pay that to the state of Tennessee for maintenance. And the library distributions are there, you can look through those. In solid waste, residential pickup contract, $22,229.53 to Waste Connections. And then our landfill and dumpster expenses, $1,539.60 to Republic Services. Any questions?
Having no questions, all in favor of accepting this report, aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion carries. Thank you, Jessica. We will now have a public hearing which is required to close out the CDBG downtown grant. The recorder will review the project and then we will open the floor for comments.
Okay. So this grant is funded by federal funds. It's a community development block grant. And one of the eligible projects that we had was to improve historic Main Street buildings. So since we're a federally recognized Main Street district, we're allowed to use CDBG funding for that, which was one of the primary reasons we got into the Main Street district to begin with. So there were 5 projects included in this, and we'll go through numbers also on it. Project 1 was the Oddfellows Lodge building downtown. It is a historic building. If you'll notice the before picture, this one, you can see at the very top of each window, they're like blocked out and they're not fully glass. That was not the actual original building. All of those windows through this grant were replaced with brand new windows, which should hopefully help with the energy efficiency of that building. And then on this side of it, you can see where the top arches were restored to their original building. Multiple businesses are housed in there too. Project 2 is the Woodrow McCoy building. The lower cornice is probably the most easily visible thing. You'll notice this side, the before picture, it's only about halfway across, and the owner completed it to the rest of it and put a new cornice all the way across the front. There was also brick tuck pointing to help with the structure itself to keep it solid and steady, and it helps aesthetically also. All the window frames were repainted, new windows were put in. The awnings that were there previously will go back up as soon as all the work on that building's done. And then on the side of that building, there's a before and after shot. I think that makes a huge difference having that side done. The city did pair another grant that we had for a mural. We leveraged funds for that, so we ended up putting a couple $1,000s into that to have that lower wall painted. And I think the overall impact is going to be very helpful. This project will be presented at the International Economic Development Conference in Nashville next month. I'll be doing, I'm a speaker at that conference, and this is one of the projects we're presenting on that. So adding that additional leverage funds is probably going to help us get our name out there a little bit more. Project 3 was Hunter's Courtyard. Before there was no awning, or there were small awnings. Afterwards we had put a large awning, and we have had multiple other cities call us and ask what vendor we use to put this awning up because they want to do the same thing in their downtowns. It also enabled them to open another business there with outdoor dining, which was especially important this last year. It's called Jack's Barbecue. It's open Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays in downtown. So that's a great statistic. We can get back to the Department of Economic Development and tell them it actually opened a business because of this project. Project 4 is the Michaels building. The bottom floor is currently used as an attorney's office. The top floor is an air bed and breakfast that recently opened, in part due to some of the funding on this project. All the windows were replaced on this building. I think there were 16 windows total on this building, so again, should help with energy efficiency, and kept the same historic New Orleans look that was on that building to begin with. This one is pretty easy to see the difference. Before, most of these windows were boarded up or broken out, and now they're all new windows on the Scruggs building. That one ended up being, I want to say, in the 20s, 21, 22 new windows. I think it made a big difference on that building. This is a map ECD requires that we show them exact locations within the Main Street district of where all these projects were. So you can see we tried to kind of spread it out throughout the Main Street district. This is the overall investment. The state of Tennessee used those federal fundings and gave us $100,000. The property owners matched over $45,000 in their personal funds, and then the city leveraged $3,000. It improved the facades of 16 businesses and 2 residential upper floor apartments, which is, the state would be very happy with those kind of numbers for that amount of money to have that kind of impact on the number of businesses. So I feel like this project was a success. We are actually receiving an award from East Tennessee Development District about this project on Thursday. Mayor Lowe, Lamar, Sam and his wife are all going to be attending that award ceremony on Thursday night, and any of the rest of you want to go, let me know, and we'll send them an RSVP. But they're going to be presenting this slideshow as well as an interview about the project. So it's good. It's always good to have Sweetwater's name out there in a positive light. And now the mayor opened the public hearing if anybody has any comments about it.
Is anyone present to make comments on the close of the grant?
All looks very nice.
Do I?
It all looks very nice.
Thank you, Kelly. It does. It does. It's made a big difference. All right. If no more comments, this hearing is closed. We have no old business. In new business, the recorder has a quarterly financial report, which will also serve as our annual year-end report for June 30th, 2021.
Okay. My PowerPoint got a real workout this month. Here is my second PowerPoint of tonight. So this is our fiscal year in review, and it makes me even more excited than the last one did. So this is as of June 30th, 2021. Our revenues were $8.8 million, or 134% of what we budgeted. And part of that is because last year, as COVID was hitting and we were working on our budget for the year in March and April, we drastically reduced our budget because we assumed that we would have a hit in sales tax and property tax. Maybe people would be able to pay their property taxes, so we reduced our budget. So that 134 is a little misleading because we had intentionally reduced our budget because we thought COVID was going to have such an impact. The expenditures came out at 109% of budgeted, which at first glance doesn't look great, but that includes the fire truck loan that we processed halfway through the year. So we had proceeds coming in of $598,000 and we spent out $602,000 for 2 trucks when we thought we were going to have to spend $750,000 for 2 trucks. So again, I was very happy with that. Revenues, we actually collected about the same in current property taxes. It did not seem to affect people. I don't know whether they use their stimulus money to pay back taxes, because our back taxes were higher this year than what they normally are, collection-wise. So we did very good on property taxes. Sales tax collections, I say this every year, guys, but we hit 2 more records in 2020. One was in April, so I get that that was probably stimulus checks going out and people spending. I mean, every television in Walmart was bought with those stimulus checks. But then we set another record later in the year, which I couldn't tie to any particular federal stimulus, or, I mean, I don't really know why, other than maybe people were spending locally instead of driving to Knoxville or Chattanooga or other places during the pandemic. So our sales tax collections hit another record. I'm going to give you another slide that's dedicated just to that. There's our sales tax history over the last 11 years. And even better than that, well, actually, that's 2 slides away. I won't jump ahead. That's amazing. That's amazing. We said a few years ago we wanted sales tax to be our largest revenue instead of property tax, and put that more shared equally among tourists and other people instead of just property tax owners, and we have definitely accomplished that goal. These are our expenditures versus revenues for year-end actuals for the last, since 2002. So the blue line is revenues, the orange line is expenditures. So the last several years have been very good to us. So this year, we put almost $1.7 million back into our fund balance, which is a record. We have never put that much back in the fund balance in 1 year. So you can see our fund balance growth is now over $4 million, over $4.5 million. That does include about $40,000, which is the library. It does include about $400,000, which is State Street aid. It does include about $80,000, which is drug fund. So that is all funds, but to be able to put a number up there, I mean, you can look last year, we were super excited to be right at $3 million, and we added another $1.7 million to our fund balance. So here are our balances as of June 30th in all of our different accounts. And that is in your packets if you want to look at that in more detail. This is the one I'm excited about. There's our local sales tax compared to our property tax. The blue line is local sales tax, the orange line is property tax. Clearly our property tax owners should be happy because they're not, they've had one tax increase in the last 10 years. We hopefully won't have to have another tax increase for another 10 years, as long as we keep bringing new businesses in. This year so far there's been 18 new businesses open in Sweetwater. We had 21 last year during the pandemic. I got to tell that number to the Assistant Commissioner of ECB last week, and she was very happy about that. Here's our debt summary, and I actually put this slide in here for Billy Wayne, who's not here, but he had asked about our total outstanding debt. Our debt to income ratio for the general government fund, which is the part we have control over, is 28%. So right now, with the fund balance we have, if I absolutely had to, I could write a check and pay off all of our debt with one check right this second. And be back at the fund balance we were at just 3 or 4 years ago, so it wouldn't even hurt us that bad. But there is a purpose to governmental debt, and that is to kind of help spread the cost of those assets that last 40 and 50 years and help spread it over so that multiple generations are also paying for it. It's not really fair to make the generation now pay for stuff that's going to be here 40 years from now. So that's a concept called intergenerational debt specifically for governments. Education debt is $4.8 million. Utility debt's around $7.9 million. Of course, their revenues are much higher than ours also. So our total outstanding debt that we have control over, even including education and the utilities, is just under $15 million, which is still a very healthy place to be. Any questions on there's also a line item detail showing every line item. So kudos to our department heads for staying within their budgets. You guys did a great job. I think everything that went over was stuff that was discussed openly with the board before it was ever purchased. So we couldn't do this if it weren't for the department heads doing a good job staying within their budgets.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
That's it for now.
It's all good news. Totally be sure you get all that now.
I got most of it.
Jessica, she can help you out. We want Madisonville over there to look at us with glee. Next, we have the American Rescue Plan Act, the overview. Jessica and I went to Cleveland, sit in on a meeting on this with the comptroller last month regarding funding for Sweetwater. There was quite a few people there, and we didn't learn a whole lot, I don't think, but we learned that they've not finalized it out yet, so to speak. But we are going to get some money. We have a larger amount than originally expected, I think, coming down the pike. We wanted to share with you what we know. And should we have another workshop, the actual allocation funds will be given to us. Do we have any idea right now what that could be?
Yeah, and actually I'm going to go through that. So
Okay.
I'll give them a number and what it's estimated.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, PowerPoint number 3. Sweetwater originally was told we were going to get $1.5 million. It is now $1.7 million in ARPA funds. It will be a pass-through grant through the state of Tennessee's Finance and Administration. This is the federal COVID Recovery Act. That's basically what this money is coming from. All cities of Tennessee have been given an allocated amount. It's based on their total budget. So for us, that includes the utilities and the schools. So in that respect, they definitely helped us by having them included in our budget. There's 2 tranches. They will give one sometime probably in September. I've already applied for the money to be deposited. We have set up a separate fund on the general ledger. It's still in the general fund, but it's a separate LGIP bank account. They have said any interest earned off that money that we're allowed to just deposit it back into the general fund. So at the end of the project, I would just transfer whatever's coming from interest to the general fund as revenue. Okay, so this is what the comptroller is asking. we be transparent. We do projects that we can point to and say that is what we use the money for. So they want it to be something, at least in some cases, that is tangible. They want it something that is clearly eligible, not in the gray area. I had mentioned last time we talked that I was kind of waiting because I hoped that the state was going to take liability, that F&A was going to say, if we approve your project, then we're taking liability, that it will be repaid by the federal government. Unfortunately, they are not going to do that unless we decide to give our money to them, which we don't want to do. So we are going to take on some liability and making sure that the projects that we choose are going to be reimbursable. The good news is they want to get rid of this money. They're not trying to make us jump through a bunch of hoops that aren't worth something. But there will be some significant monitoring and paper trails that we have to keep up with for it. So I guess what I'm saying is we don't need to wander into the gray area. We need to do things that are clearly eligible. The comptroller specifically said he was asking that we do significant investments that affect the most number of people in our communities. We do they're non-reoccurring funds, so we do non-reoccurring expenses. So we don't add people to payroll that we can't pay for later, because you're only going to get this money one time. We take maintenance costs into consideration, particularly if we're acquiring assets like buildings or something like that. And also they hope that this money, that we use at least a portion of it to be able to make some kind of economic impact on our community, because it's supposed to be recovery funds. So he wants us to stabilize communities, spend it strategically, create a group to strategize how to spend this money, which is probably this governing board, the department heads, and then communicate with any other governments if we have projects that could be affecting them where we could team up and, you know, make something bigger happen. This is the general information. Our allocation is based on the budget of $39 million, which includes Sweetwater Utilities Board and the Sweetwater Board of Education. Sweetwater Board of Education is receiving over $3 million on their own, so they're getting their own specific allocation of funding in addition to what they've already received. We do need to consider what needs SUB might have as we discuss how to allocate this funding, because they're not getting a separate allocation of money. Their budget's included with ours. So this is money that the state is not saying we have to share it with the utility board. Technically, we're the governing body and we can spend it all ourselves, but if it weren't for their budget, we would have not gotten this amount of money. The state is not going to take liability for our projects, like I said before. They are going to assemble a review team that we can email questions, projects into, and they'll tell us, yeah, we think that's eligible, or no, we think you ought to stay away from that. They're not going to dictate that, but they are going to pay really close attention because they're the ones that are the pass-through, and they don't want to be stuck with their hands empty either. These funds have to be spent by December 31st, 2024 in almost all circumstances, and I'll talk about those exceptions in just a second. The final rule is going to be sent in September, so we can't really make any firm decisions until then, and I don't know that we would want to anyway, but the federal government is probably going to loosen the restrictions just a little bit when they issue the final rule, so hopefully by our September workshop we'll have a little bit more guidance and know a little bit better what to do. So this is ineligible. These are things we absolutely cannot do it because the statute specifically excludes it. Any expenses prior to March of 2021, so we can't go back, even if it was stuff directly related to COVID, we cannot go back prior to 3/3/21. We cannot put money in our rainy day fund, which it doesn't need it. We cannot pay debt payments, extra principal, or even fees. So let's say we had, this is where we could kind of get tripped up. If we had a project that part of it was being funded by debt, we would have to make sure that this money was not paying an underwriting fee, was not paying any kind of fee associated with debt. Also, we can't make pension payments. We can't pay off any unfunded pension liability, but you guys already know we don't have any unfunded pension liability because you've overfunded our pension the last several years. Eligible uses, these are the 5 things the statute says we can spend money on. We'll skip to the next slide because I want you to see number 3. Replace lost public sector revenue. There were 2 areas where we lost revenue during COVID. It was gasoline tax, which funds State Street Aid, and tourism tax from Hotel Motel. Even though it still ended strong, technically we had lost revenue, we had lower revenue in those 2 areas. The way the formula calculates is it has to be overall for your entire city. So ours was not less than, thank goodness. So that's not eligible for us. So we can mark that one off the list right now. So that leaves public health and safety, negative economic impacts, premium pay to essential workers, and water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. there has been a lot of feedback about how restricted that spending is. Public health and safety is the first one. You can do it to incentivize vaccinations. You can do it to set up vaccination sites. You can make capital investments in public facilities, including acquiring public facilities, so that you could have future vaccination sites there, or so that you could have meeting rooms that allow more social distancing. So that one is pretty broad. There's a very good chance we could use that to purchase land, purchase a building, purchase something like that if we had something coming up that we needed. Public safety, they have said you can add additional police officers. It should be proportional to the harm we experienced during the pandemic. And what they are talking about is some cities really experienced a lot of looting and things like that during the pandemic. What they're saying is if you're adding a police officer to help prevent that, or, like Chief Byron added additional surveillance and things like that, that they would be able to justify that. So that is a possibility, but we have to keep in mind that after 2024, we're not getting that funding anymore. Public buildings, if you need to rehab a building that's too small for social distancing, or to add ventilation to a building, those are eligible expenditures. There's other things under public health and safety. I mean, we can start our own vaccine clinic if we want to. I mean, there's several other things we can do, but those are the ones that I thought probably applied the most to a small city like ours. Negative economic impacts. This is one of the things the comptroller said he did hope we addressed in some way, not with the entire amount of money, but with some of the money. You can support nonprofits, particularly those that had to do food banks or something like that during the time. They have actually allocated extra money to food banks too. The tourism industry, they want to help support that because it was so hard hit, and no other federal allocation has gone to that. And businesses, these will be sub-monitored. So if we gave money to a nonprofit, or if we gave to small businesses or something like that, the person that receives the money, they also have to comply with the rules. It does particularly mention the hospitality and tourism industries. It also mentions direct assistance to food banks, low-income persons, and businesses. I did have a conversation earlier this week with Sweetwater Ministries, because I think that's probably the predominant food bank. He said they did not really have a need right now, that their food bank has been supplemented so much through the month that they've actually spent less on the food bank than they normally do, because they've been getting federal funding. The only need he mentioned was a second freezer so that they could do more. He said they have had more numbers and it would help if they had a second freezer. I think that was like a $600 expenditure. Please don't make me do the paperwork on this for a $600 expenditure. Let's just give them the $600, okay? But anyway, that's something that is eligible if y'all come across something that maybe there is a need for. But I reached out to the local one that I was aware of. You can give direct assistance to low-income people and businesses. Again, that sounds like a nightmare, but it is a possible expenditure. Premium paid to essential workers. A lot of cities are choosing to do this with at least a portion of the money. The comptroller did tell us that the mayor is who designates who is considered essential within the jurisdiction.
Buster.
And the state recommends using this as a one-time bonus, since the funds are non-reoccurring, not to increase in salary overall, but just giving a one-time bonus. Water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. The feds and the state seem very enthusiastic about this option. The state is actually going to provide matching funds in a non-competitive grant, which is unheard of. They've never done that before. Basically, they're saying, probably based on our budget again, if we choose to put part of this money into water, sewer, or broadband, they are going to supplement it with another state grant. So I know one of the things we've talked to Eric Hicks about, he has 2 or 3 shovel-ready opportunities regarding water tanks. One of which will be something that we are trying to accomplish through economic development right now out near the interstate area for our new industry that's coming in. It's not something they have to have right this second, but they will need to have that water tank in there to be able to do all the plans that are out there right now. The state would actually give another allocation to that. So maybe instead of us just rehabbing 1 water tank, we might be able to rehab 2 water tanks because of what the state's going to give. So I think that's definitely an option we need to strongly consider. Eric is quarantined tonight, or he would have been here to tell you about exactly which water tanks he has ready to go. But he can be here at the September workshop. For water projects and sewer projects only, the construction deadline is expanded to 12/31/26. So they give them an extra 2 years because they know how long water projects take. Water tank rehabs don't take that long. So I think we're very comfortable with that. The funds have to be contractually obligated by 12/31/24. but they don't actually have to be spent until 26. So we got a little more leeway on that. And the last slide, it's just, let's talk again. Let's maybe tentatively schedule this for the September 28th workshop, and hopefully we'll have the absolute final rule from the state, or from the feds at that point. And then the state's gonna, they've been very good about being responsive. Everything I've emailed them, like I emailed them a whole list of questions, and I had a call back the very next day about all of it. And I'm sure every city was emailing me questions. So I do think they have been pretty specific about equipment. They said we can't buy equipment with this money, like there's no category that falls into. But they may loosen the rule to allow communication equipment, which would be a good thing because we have a radio issue coming up in a couple more years, that if we can spend this money on it instead of having to pay our taxpayer money on it, that might be a good option. Do you guys have any questions right now? That's pretty much all I know, so I may not be able to answer them, but.
I don't have a question, but I have a statement. I noticed in the TML paper that just come out that the survey across the state, the #1 deal with the money was bonuses for employees.
We couldn't give out 1.7 million in bonuses because there is a cap of 25,000 per employee, but
No, I just mentioned that this.
Well, they have to be essential workers too.
they do have to be essential workers.
Now, that's a broad, what essential worker is.
You get to decide.
I told you, Ben Buster.
I guess I better buy Daddy a new watch or something.
If a policeman goes out here, he's an essential worker. Fireman's an essential worker. Looks to me like, I don't know, if you go out here and pick up a bed and the mattresses that is infested with bed bugs, you're an essential worker. You go out here and mow somebody's lawn, that's essential. I don't
The
know what-
state earlier in the year, when we changed our IDs to accommodate, but when the state was giving permissions and defining essential workers, basically it said all local government employees were essential workers. But y'all, this isn't just restricted to city employees. I mean, it could be utility workers, it could be teachers, it could be hospital workers. I mean, it could be a huge, vast pool of things. So that's why we're gonna really read through that final rule and see what all it says. But, yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. Thank you, Jessica. We'll know more about this maybe by September 28th.
Here's hoping. I think so, probably.
Okay, we are applying for the second leg of the sidewalk bike path that connects Main Street to Highway 68 and High Street. There's only a 5% match on this grant funding. We need a resolution showing our support to apply for the grant. Is there a motion?
Make the motion for approval. Second.
In discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion does carry. And that's coming up here, didn't we get some information that's coming, that we've pretty well been approved? There's
This
gonna
is
be a-
actually a different grant, but we did, the mayor's talking about the Transportation Alternatives Grant, which is something we had discussed with Buster's department about connecting Industrial Park Road to Highway 322 to North Main Street. So we applied for that grant for the North Main Street section because of the environmental concerns on that. We would need more engineering for it, and we were approved. So we've got another $1.4 million grant to do a bike trail and sidewalk from the post office to where Mays Avenue comes out onto Main Street. So that's
Right.
gonna provide another leg of connectivity, so.
And this one over here will be a couple of years.
This one right here has already been awarded, the one that goes from Main Street to
But
where
the
the
other
Fred's building was. And this application is for from Fred's Farmers, I guess I should say now, from Farmers Furniture around 68 back to High Street. So it's really gonna give us some nice connectivity throughout the town.
Okay. Our Sweetwater Housing Authority held a public hearing last month and passed a resolution to adopt a redevelopment plan for the TMI property. The next step in the process is the city board to adopt a resolution. Do I hear a motion to adopt a resolution?
So moved. Second.
In discussion. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion does carry. Commissioner Hughes has requested to promote a full-time litter control position to a full-time position. A budget amendment would also be needed in the upcoming meeting in order to fund this change. You want to talk about this, Lamar, kind of give us an idea of what?
Basically, we hired a part-time person in February, control the litter program, pick up trash and that around the city. And I think everybody here has been out around the city and seen a big difference in the amount of trash that's been removed and how much cleaner the city looks. Also looking at the future, we got supposedly one guy's hunting a job now, we got another guy that's near retirement age, and I would like to get this girl in before we lose her. And I'd like to make a motion that we make her full-time.
When you want that to come into effect?
In the morning, fine.
Okay. That's a motion, right? So here, second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed likewise, motion carries. All right, anything else needs to come before the board? Chuck, can you give us a report on what's going on in your department?
We've got several projects still. Red Stag is progressing. They're moving a lot of dirt still, building the road into the facility. They're still pretty much on schedule. Steel prices and plastic prices, plastic polymer is kind of dictating some things that they're trying to change on the interior structure of their buildings, but they're working on those things. We've also gotten interest that probably be coming before the planning commission on another restaurant that's looking at a space that we've been trying to get someone interested in. So I've had some communications with them, and they're planning on submitting a site plan to the planning commission, but that'll be a piece of property out on 68 that's been kind of vacant and dormant for a while. That'll be a nice shot in the arm. Just outside of that, just trying to keep up. Lots of building.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Richard, I know everything's going good with you. Staying busy, mowing, everything. Eddie, anything happening in the police department? John, anything happening on your end?
Same old, rocking along.
Okay. All minds clear? We are adjourned. Thank you for being here.